Morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
We're learning Mishna Pesachim, Parak Dalet, Chapter 4, Mishna Ches, Mishna 8. Okay. Shisha Devarim. There were 6 things. Asu Anshe Yerichai, that the people of Yerichai, Jericho, the name of a city. There were 6 things that the people of Yerichai did, which really was not to the liking of the sages. Al shloisha michu biyadam, for 3 things the sages protested against what they did. Al shloisha lo michu biyadam, and for 3 things they did not protest what they did. They let it go. Ve'elu ein shlo michu biyadam. These are the things that they did not protest against what they did. Now, from the next thing that we say, you'll see why this was brought in. The next thing, the first of the 3 things that they weren't supposed to do, but the Chachamim let it go, was taking place on Erev Pesach after midday. You're not supposed to be doing work. So it says, Markiva and Dekolim Kol Hayom. The entire day of Erev Pesach, they were busy. Markiva means they were busy grafting date palms. That means they took, what they explain here is, they took they inserted branches of male date palms, which produce fruit, into female palms, which would not produce fruit, so that the females would become productive. So they grafted. And they did this on Erev Pesach after Chatzos, after midday. Now, grafting is clearly a malacha, considered an act of labor. However, we know that if for davar ha'avud, if in order to prevent the loss, you can do acts of malach, acts of labor on Chol Hamoed, and all the more so on Erev Pesach after midday. So the point of contention here was that the people of Yerichai felt that they needed to do it in this specific time. They needed to graft in this specific time because otherwise it's not going to work out. Otherwise, it's going to result in a loss. If they don't graft it at this point of time in the season, it's going to be a loss to them. Well, the point was apparently they had a short window of time. I don't know. It's a good point. They needed to do it at this point of time. Maybe they had a lot of them to do it. It went into Erev Pesach. But the point is that this day they felt that if they didn't do it on this day, didn't do the grafting on this day, it would cause a financial loss to them. And therefore, they said, we're allowed to do it. The Chachamim disagreed. They did not consider this situation a case of financial loss. But being that their actions had some kind of basis to it, it wasn't just ignoring things. Therefore, they did not protest against it. It's more like, we're telling you that it's not a financial loss. Okay? You feel it is that way? All right, we'll let it go. Now, the next example, the Karach and Shema. Karach and Shema, they translate it as they would link Shema. It means like this. We know there's a mitzvah to read Shema every day. If you look at Shema as it's written in the Torah, you have the first pasuk is Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, and the next verse is V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha. When we say Shema, we insert something in between those 2 verses. Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus Lo Olam Va'ed. That's out of the Torah, but that's something that the sages instituted that we should insert into Shema. Well, the people of Yerichai didn't follow that. They weren't inserting it, and they just did it as it's written in the Torah. So again, they should not have been doing that, but the Chacham didn't protest it because at the end of the day, you still get the mitzvah reading Shema, even if you leave out Baruch Shem. And the third example is the Kaitzrin v'Goitchen Lefnei HaOmer. They used to harvest and pile up the grain before the Omer was brought. Now, the Omer, as we have been dealing with Sfiras Omer now, the Omer was a carbon, it was a sacrifice, a meal offering that was brought on the second day of Pesach from the new barley, from the new crops. You are not permitted to eat from the new crops that grew from after last Pesach until now, until after that Omer was brought. That was in times of the Beis HaMikdash. It had to be brought. When it was brought, everything became permissible. The Chachamim said that because of that, as a precautionary measure, they instituted that not only that you should not harvest or pile up the grain before the Omer is brought. Like, don't touch it. Stay away from it. Because we're afraid if you do, you may come to eat it. You're not allowed to eat it yet. So the Chachamim said, no doing that. And they didn't listen. They still did it. And the Chachamim, again, did not protest against it. They bring down here on the bottom because the chance that people eating from the new crop were pretty small. So it really was an extra precautionary measure. But since the concern wasn't really that big, they didn't make a fuss about it. Okay, so these are the three things that they weren't supposed to do, but the Chachamim did not protest against it. The Eilu Shemicha B'Yadam. The following are the things that the Chachamim did protest against. And the first one brought down is Matirin Gamziyoy Shel Hektish. They used to permit the new growth of a tree that belonged to Hektish, that belonged to, as they translated here, the temple treasury. If I want to sanctify something that it should become the property of the Beis HaMikdash, of the Holy Temple, I say, this is Hektish, this is sanctified, it now becomes the property of the Beis HaMikdash. What's the Beis HaMikdash going to do with it? Well, they're probably going to sell it, and then they'll sell it, and the money will become sanctified and belong to the treasury of the Beis HaMikdash. In the meantime, while it's still Hektish, you're not allowed to benefit from it, you're not allowed to use it. If you were to accidentally use it, you would transgress the prohibition called Me'ilah, unintentional usage of property of the Beis HaMikdash. And what comes with that is a sacrifice and a payment with a fifth of the value added, a whole process you have to go through to gain atonement. Now, there is a opinion that says that if, let's say, I sanctify a tree, so the only thing that's sanctified is the tree as is right now. But what, let's say, grows further is not sanctified, or there's no prohibition of Me'ilah there, which my understanding is there's no prohibition of using it. So there's an opinion like that. And these people here followed that opinion. The problem is the Chachamim protested against it. Why? Because even if, according to Torah law, you're allowed to use it, what grows after you sanctified it, the sages instituted you're not allowed to. And this was something already serious enough decree that when they weren't listening to it, they protested against it. That's the first one. The next one is they ate from fruit that fell from a tree on Shabbos. That means like this. There is a halacha in Shabbos called muktzah. Muktzah means that anything that I am not expecting to be able to use on Shabbos is set aside from usage. You're not allowed to move it. Okay? Now, fruit on a tree. It's hanging on the tree on Shabbos. It's muktzah, right? I can't detach it. I can't take it off. Now, let's say it falls off on its own. Well, if it falls off on its own on Shabbos, it's still muktzah, because the rule is, if when Shabbos began, something is muktzah, like that's fruit that was hanging from the tree, that was connected, that was still hanging from the tree, even if the reason for it to be muktzah goes away on Shabbos, but if it entered Shabbos as muktzah, it remains muktzah. Now, there were these, in Yerichai, the people would see fruit that fell off a tree was Shabbos. When they found it was Shabbos. Now, if the fruit fell off the tree before Shabbos, it's not muktzah. If it fell off on Shabbos, it's muktzah. So there was really, when they came and they found these fruits under the tree, there was a suffix, there was a doubt. Is it muktzah? Is it not muktzah? So the people of Yerichai said, it's only a doubt, we're allowed to use it. Why? Because there's a rule, suffix derabbanan l'kula. When we have a doubt regarding a rabbinic law, we can be lenient. Muktzah is a rabbinic law. And therefore, they said, if we have a doubt, we don't know, did they fall off the tree before Shabbos or on Shabbos? It's a doubt. So we can be lenient. We can eat them. And the Chachamim protested because the Chachamim said, muktzah is different. The decree of muktzah does not follow that principle of suffix rabbanan l'kula, when there's a doubt in a rabbinic law that we go lenient, and therefore you're not allowed to eat the fruits. And they felt that this was important enough that they did protest against it. And the last example is v'noistin peah liyerek. They would give peah when it came to vegetables. We'll explain what that means in a second. And the Chachamim protested against these things. Peah, the Torah says that when you have a field and you're harvesting it, you've got to leave a part of the field or for the poor. Not allowed to harvest it. You got to leave it, and they'll cut it down and they'll take it. That's called peah. It's called corner. You leave it over. You go ahead and you do your field, and you leave something over for the poor to harvest. Okay, that law applies by trees. It does not apply by vegetables. If you have a vegetable patch or a vegetable garden, you don't have to leave peah for them. Now, the difference is like this. There's a very big difference. If something actually is peah, if something is actually what the Torah says you got to leave for the poor, from those things, you do not have to separate truma for the kohen Ma'aseh for the Levi, etc. The tithes that we have to take off from our produce that grew does not apply to produce that we have to leave for the poor. It's exempt from that. Now, if vegetables don't have a law of payah, if the Torah does not tell us to leave payah from vegetables, then vegetables growing in a patch, if somebody takes them before they eat them, they have to separate the shumas and the maasros. They have to tithe it. They have to take care of it. If they don't, it's called tevel. And if it's tevel, it's forbidden to eat. It's a very serious prohibition. So the people of Yerichai said, we have these vegetable gardens or patches, and we're leaving payah for the poor. That's a mistake. That's wrong. Now, by declaring it payah, you're saying that now when a poor man comes to take it, he doesn't have to separate shumas and maasros from it before he eats it. And that's incorrect, because there is no law of payah by the vegetables, which means really it does need to be tithed, which means really it is tevel, and they're eating it, and they're eating it thinking they don't have to separate anything from it, and they're transgressing as they eat it. And therefore, when the Chachamim saw them doing that, they protested, because they were causing other people to stumble. They were causing the poor people to think that it is payah, and they wouldn't have to, and they would eat it without separating shumas and maasros, without tithing it, that you're not allowed to do. So because of the fact that they were causing these poor people, again, unintentionally, but causing them to sin unintentionally, causing them to sin, they were the Chachamim protested against what they were doing. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome, Martin.